Are you more often sad than happy in your marriage? Are you tired of the conflict, stress, and the heartache? Have you exhausted the catchphrase, marriage is supposed to make you holy, not happy? Do you want to get off the rewarded cycle because you've discovered that after spinning your wheels for years inside of that cliche, you feel more unloved and lonely than ever? Have you emotionally flatlined and you're ready to give up, in spite of counseling and having read all the books on being the most excellent wife that you can be? After all these years, you understand what marriage is supposed to look like, yet there's just more isolation and disconnection. If that sounds like your marriage, you've come to the right spot. Hi there, my name is Lillian, and here I talk about God and the femininity that He created you with, and how that femininity can heal you, give you back your life, and possibly the marriage you've always hoped for. There's a caveat though. As you grow and your femininity shines brighter and you get stronger in the Lord, a true believing brother will love who you're becoming. But a wolf in sheep's clothing will hate your new sense of self. As God regenerates your heart to be the daughter that He always meant for you to be, the wolf will make your marriage worse. In today's video, I'm going to reveal 2 more questions you can ask yourself in order to see if you're thinking like a man. These ones will feel a bit more provocative because they go against the traditional masculine bias. But I don't want to be just a critic of a problem that I see. I want to offer you a fresh perspective in a way that honors the fact that you're a woman. The feminine perspective is the opposite direction of the traditional intention for wives in marriage. Today's questions are, number 6, do I struggle with submission and respect? And number 7, how easy is it for me to identify things my husband does wrong? You can find the initial 5 questions in the first 2 videos of this series. I'll place them at the end and in the description box. In order to get yourself out of the masculine mindset, you have to be able to see that you're in it. No one can tell you that you're in it. The discovery has to come from inside of you. These are the questions that I wish I had known to ask myself years ago. That's why I'm asking you to consider them. The 6th and 7th questions are related, but I wanted to split them up so we can get a closer look at each of them individually. Let's dive in. Question 6. Do I struggle with submission and respect? When you hear words like submission and respect, you feel triggered, almost like someone has reached inside you and flipped on the cringe button. It feels gross, doesn't it? Honestly, these words can seem brutal to your heart, almost like an attack. It's why you feel repelled by them. I know what it's like to want to submit and respect my husband, yet whenever I read any of these verses about it, I wasn't filled with feelings of adaptability or warmth or pliability, but instead, rage would well up inside me. I know what it's like to live in that internal conflict where you can never find the peace from the truth that's supposed to set you free. It always left me in a sense of lack and feeling powerless, trying to understand and manage the religious expectations that never seemed to help. They just led me to repeatedly cycle through self-blame and self-doubt. I mean, how could I feel these strong negative emotions by trying to follow God's word? It can't be wrong, not if God wrote it. So something else must be off. What is it that sits between my desire of wanting to do submission and respect and being able to carry it off? Almost all of the traditional teaching about marriage explains submission and respect as though they're ideas that are conjoined. This understanding is the result of masculinity's perspective, because that perspective is direct and single-focused. The 2 ideas become a single concept that's framed like it's all or nothing. Interpreting this way implies that submission and respect are not just intertwined as a single action, but also when it comes to marriage, they're viewed as unconditional. When you take a lack of submission and glue it together with disrespect, it suggests that being disrespectful also means not submitting. In the masculine perspective, these two actions that are so reprehensible are internalized as one and the same. But here's the thing, they don't go together. They don't coincide or depend on each other because they serve two totally different dynamics. Each of them sits in completely different spheres within marriage, like the head and tail of a coin. Submission is a system or plan or program that's based in hierarchical structures that all systems operate by. Submission provides the structure for functions and duties to take place. In the case of marriage, it's the power within each role and where they sit on the structure. Submission is for the function of any organized group of people, any institution or corporation or partnership. When it comes to marriage, it's the business side of that partnership. A husband takes care of these duties and functions, and a wife takes care of those duties and functions. That's not friendship. It's a division of duties and responsibilities so that the partnership can function. The things that are going to be accomplished, the duties that can be described, and how they might change as you move from year to year. The business end of marriage is the contractual functions we agree to exchange with each other. Respect is not part of this contract. Respect is not a duty or a function or a task to be accomplished or something to be exchanged. Just like love, respect isn't in the functional sphere where it can be compartmentalized. Respect is a component of friendship. It's found in the interaction between two people. It's where reciprocity, consent, and collaboration are lived out and experienced with each other. These are the elements you'd find in any healthy friendship. It's just that in marriage, that friendship has now been elevated to a permanent status called a one-flesh relationship. When the friendship becomes a one-flesh relationship, the friendship isn't replaced by marriage, and it doesn't disappear any more than the law disappeared because of Jesus Christ. He didn't come to replace the law. He came to finish the job of completion. Matthew 5:17. Getting married makes it possible for the friendship between a brother and sister in Christ to be elevated by marriage. The one-flesh relationship is the fulfillment of the friendship. Although the structured roles of the partnership and the relationship found in a friendship both involve interpersonal connections and teamwork, there's a huge difference in terms of their focus, intimacy, commitment, and emotional dynamics. Choosing to stay in a friendship with someone where it's always you who ultimately submits, when it's always your power that's restricted, when there's an expectation that you'll be the one who suppresses your opinions, desires, or autonomy to the other person. That's not a collaborative, interdependent friendship. It's a structure of codependence and prioritizing pleasing someone else over yourself in every situation where there might be disagreement. By following the traditional marriage ideology that equates submission with respect, you dismantle all the protective layers divinely instituted to safeguard the female essence of your heart. These feminine features are defenses intended to prevent your heart from becoming vulnerable and broken down like a city without walls. This dynamic isn't a one flesh relationship, it's dominance and submission. It's called friendship, but it forces a woman to live a one flesh relationship within the structure of submission because she's now doing the role of a wife. That friendship dynamic is super unhealthy. It's so detrimental to the feminine heart that you can't even frame it as friendship. A man would never stay friends with another man if one of them was expected to regularly capitulate or defer his authentic self to another male. Healthy masculinity doesn't operate like that, but women do. Unhealed femininity will always sacrifice her own authenticity in hopes of attachment to make the connection deepen or to even be more peaceful. We are the more relational creatures, so a relationship is what matters most to us, more than our own selves. That's the nature of estrogen. But when we're unhealed, it's not just how we relate to each other. It's also how we end up relating to a husband. And in both of those kinds of friendships, we don't know how to navigate in them or steer ourselves away from them. We end up getting stuck in those kinds of friendships that destroy us instead of building us up. That's why God added conditions to every one of his commands to submit. Submission is for any structure or plan or organization that you're operating in, including marriage. When it comes to certain marriage ideologies, those conditions are almost invisible because that's how the masculine mindset interprets all or nothing. In Ephesians 5, there's two conditions found in two different phrases. The first one is in the fear of God, and the other one is as to the Lord. And there's also one in Colossians 3:18. It's as is fitting in the Lord. All those conditions that say in the fear of the Lord and as to the Lord and as is fitting in the Lord, I used to interpret them to mean in the same way. So in my interpretation, because I was thinking in a masculine mindset, I could only see that one perspective, and it told me that I was supposed to submit to my husband in the same way I would submit to God. This is wrong. We know it's wrong. Even as I said the words just now, you know it's wrong. Your husband is a human, not the one God. He's not even a God, lowercase g. When you put a one-flesh relationship inside the structure of submission, where the role of the wife is noticeably underneath the role of a husband, an authentic one-flesh relationship ceases to exist. The power dynamic that was intended for the respective roles has swallowed up the true friendship. It's now become not about the roles, but rather a woman under a man, making him basically godlike because of embodying masculinity that's now positioned higher than femininity. When you hear relationship advice that leans into masculinity having the predominance of 1, sexual desire, and 2, the need to be respected, so much that the desires from the feminine heart have become inferior, you'll know for a fact you're ingesting a traditional marriage teaching that has positioned the worth of masculinity higher than the worth of femininity. That is what's breaking down your heart and mind and keeping you gullible. It's what's poisoning you and making it impossible for you to heal into healthy shrewdness. The masculine interpretation of the scriptures when it comes to marriage, it needs for you to stay in that weak, unhealed, broken down condition so that you're naive and trusting. Like that woman that's described in 2 Timothy 3:6. If you submit in a human relationship the same way you submit to God, it's wrong in two ways. First, you're uplifting a person's worth because of their position above your own worth. You're placing someone between you and God, and he says there's no one except Jesus Christ between you and God. 1 Timothy 2:5. And second, that means a human has been raised in relationship to the level of God, and that means you're violating the second commandment. God alone holds that position with you. Exodus 20, verse 4. But even though we know it's wrong, that's the ideology that Christian wives are still being indoctrinated with. We've inserted the one flesh relationship inside the structure of submission, and we call it marriage. Those conditional phrases aren't even about you. They're about your husband. Is your husband treating you in the same way God treats you? If he is, then it's safe to submit. But if he's not treating you the same way, then you have other options. So how do you know? How do you know if he is or isn't treating you the same way God does? It's how you feel. I don't mean if you like a decision he makes or if you agree with an idea he has or a solution. All that happens in the analytical part of your brain. I'm talking about how you feel in your heart about him, not how you want to feel, not how you wished you felt, not how you hope to feel one day, and not how you think you should feel. If you feel safe, that means you can trust him the way you trust God. Trust is a manifestation of your body feeling safe, and that safety leads your body to organically submit. Feeling safe produces trust, which in turn brings submission. On the other hand, if you don't feel safe in submitting to him, then God vetoes submission through conditional phrases in his word. He backs you up in a way that protects your authentic heart by providing you with a conditional clause for every single command to submit in marriage. So when submission is distasteful or cringy to you, that's an indicator of fear. Your body's telling you that something's wrong, not with your husband, but with you. Something's broken in your emotional detection system. When you're deeply conditioned into the masculine mindset, the only solution that you can see as a way to get over all that cringe you're experiencing is to embrace all the verses that talk about conquering fear, so that you can climb on top of it in order to shut it down. That's how men conquer. They push forward to attack. They're naturally fearless because of their low estrogen level. That means their fear level is equally low. But it's different for us women. In any relationships, including marriage, God didn't design femininity to lean forward to conquer. We conquer by shrewdness. That requires leaning back quietly in order to examine and observe. 1 Peter 3, verses 4 through 6. Fear is a mechanism placed inside estrogen as an indicator. But because I was so deeply inured in masculine thinking, I was trying to suppress the main navigational tool that God gave me for the safety of my feminine heart and mind in relationships. God was trying to heal me by showing me how I was thinking, but in reality, what I was doing was fighting him because I thought I was supposed to conquer fear through attack instead of sitting still. That's what it means to wrestle with God. It's not about sin. It's about understanding. When you interlace submission with respect, it doesn't just lead to that narrow masculine interpretation. It also creates an expectation of conformity. The English word respect is associated with admiration, appreciation, or approval of another person's worth. But when submission and respect are interpreted in a one-sided or a masculine manner, wives feel pressured to show approval for the relationship even when they fundamentally disagree with how their husband's treating them. Respect and submission have nothing to do with each other. Respect is about friendship, but it's not an imperative command for a wife, not the way love is for a husband. What's really interesting about respect is that it's also conditional, but not in the same way submission is. Instead of using conditional phrases like God did with submission, he uses the Greek conjunction called hina. It means to respond. We translate it with phrases like in order that or so that. In Ephesians 5:33, the proper understanding of the grammar Paul uses is that he's telling husbands to love their wives so that their wives will be able to respect them. In order for you to feel that you can respect your husband, he has to earn it so that you can respond with admiration and esteem, so that you can appreciate him. When you admire the man who treats your heart in a careless way, or you feel neglected or dishonored, or in some cases like me, my femininity felt like it was despised. When you feel any of those emotions, your heart's going to naturally feel an incongruency, and it should. This is the cringy button inside you. It's a real thing. That's why you detest the idea of respecting your husband. You can feel that he's demanding for you to demonstrate respect by submitting to him. That gross, condescending pain that you experience is because your female body knows it's because he believes his male value has been placed above your feminine worth. It's hard because deep down inside of us, God created us to want to respect a man. But respect should be an organic response to your husband. That's why you feel an internal conflict, because it's not happening organically. Instead, you're trying to force it, because that marriage ideology that's steeped in tradition is trying to coerce your heart through your mind. That conflict is fed by the notion that because femininity's position underneath masculinity, it has less worth. So we sacrifice self-respect in favor of respecting a husband. There are 3 reasons a woman sacrifices her own dignity. 1, because we've got an inherent bent towards relationship that lives inside our femininity. And 2, because we're following the masculine interpretation. And 3, because of being unhealed. We believe the masculine interpretation is the right one, and so we trust it. And in turn, we give it more respect through submission, regardless of how we're being treated or the condition of the marriage. So that leads us to try and regain that sacrificed dignity by compensating with works. And this is where the model of the excellent wife from Proverbs 31 originates from. Working really hard and demonstrating our worth through the value of accomplishment in hopes that one day our feminine heart will be seen and will receive love. My dear sisters, that's not a one-flesh relationship. When you achieve through function in marriage, that means your view of being a woman is spoiled by doing wifery. By doing all those things listed in Proverbs 31, you try to be excellent through doing outcomes. Those two don't go together, just like submission and respect don't go together. Submission is in the sphere of function for the division of labor. Doing tasks are achieved through the masculine operating system. You accomplish tasks and achieve outcomes with your testosterone. All those functions listed in Proverbs 31, verses 13 through 37, they're all outcomes. They have nothing to do with the one-flesh relationship or any kind of friendship. It's verse 11 that confuses us. The heart of her husband trusts in her. Trust is internalized, completely different in a man. than it is in a woman. So we women think that because his heart trusts her, this means that he's going to love her. No, that's not what it means. The husband trusts her skills and talents as a business partner for himself in the functional tasks of the marriage. It's great when a husband trusts the heart of his wife, but it's not a one-flesh relationship between masculinity and femininity where you'd find reciprocity. It's not the dynamic where the love of a man draws out the respect from the femininity of a woman. When a woman trusts a man, it means she feels safe in his presence. A man never feels unsafe in any relationship. God designed testosterone to be fearless, and so, because men are 90% testosterone, fear doesn't factor into their relationships like it does with women. It doesn't matter what action plan you devise. It doesn't matter how you better integrate functions towards your husband. It doesn't matter what book or podcast you follow. As long as you're doing prescribed precepts in a masculine mindset, you'll be stuck in a loop, striving for the attention and love from your husband. So, you'll be an excellent masculine business partner for him, but he can't be attracted to your femininity if he can't feel your heart when he's in your presence. There's an expectation that's wrong and unspoken. It's that the responsibility for the marriage belongs to the wife. The fact that most, not all of it, but the majority of marriage information, books, podcasts, etc., are consumed by women and wives, it's the proof that we have accepted that expectation. Let go of that masculine expectation by reframing submission and respect. You can do that in these two ways. Number one, first, embrace the understanding that fear isn't always negative. In fact, it can be a source of strength, especially for women. Recognize that fear, when understood from the feminine perspective, becomes a powerful tool given to you by God so that you can live in His principles of respect and submission in a way that glorifies Him, honors your faith and yourself, as well as your husband. Fear is a guide that teaches you about trust. It ensures your safety in relationships. And second, instead of using your energy and time towards improving the marriage, redirect all that masculine effort towards focusing on yourself, doing things for you. In that redirection, you'll have a much larger capacity to concentrate on your own healing. And this will have a positive and an empowering effect on your heart because you'll be embracing the reality that the only person you have the power to change is you. Now, to the seventh question you can ask yourself. How easy is it for me to identify the things my husband does wrong? Although it's not your intention, you spend more time focusing on what he's doing wrong towards you rather than appreciating your own feminine features and strength in order to resist those behaviors. There are two components that make up question 7. The first one is that you're hyper-focused on his actions and behaviors or the lack of them. The things he doesn't change that you want him to change, they become all you can see. They feel heavier inside your heart, almost like they get larger. Prolonged and increasing focus has turned into vigilance. And that means there's a line between you and him that's being blurred. You're losing sight of where you end and he begins. When you're hyper-focused on his actions, you're inadvertently handing over the worth of your femininity to be validated by him. Your feminine worth is not up for debate. It's God-given. God alone has already predetermined that when he created you as his daughter. If your husband does what you want or what you think is right, you end up feeling validated. On the other hand, if he doesn't, you end up losing a little bit more of yourself with each disappointment. The end result of this intense concentration is that God is being slowly shifted away from the center stage, along with your worth. God's being moved into the peripheral. You can tell how far God has been shifted out of center focus by looking at the ratios. Who gets more of your mental and emotional time? Only you and God know the answer to that. How much real estate does your husband own inside your brain that actually belongs to God? The second component of question 7 is when you do something in order to get something. It's the element that's hiding. It's actually more like a seedling because it's not static. It gives life to that first component. It's the motive that drives your desire for him to change or improve. This seedling is the false teaching that was planted inside of me as a Christian woman. It's not rooted in Christ. It just masquerades under the name Christian. It's actually rooted in evolutionary biology or the law of attraction. One is secularism and the other is universalism, but both of them pivot from masculine energy. Neither one of them can tell you what it truly means to be created in the image of God as a female creature, because neither one of them credits God with his magnificent design of the feminine heart. Both will keep you locked into thinking like a man because their solutions for conflicts in marriage are based in masculine works. And remember, it's men who do good actions so that they can feel good emotions. When you're experiencing problems and conflicts in marriage, and the advice is for you to work harder to find his good traits instead of focusing on his bad ones, or find more positive things in his character and affirm those about him. Both of those options are actions that you do, and actions are what men move forward in. So those solutions work for a masculine man, but they don't work for a feminine woman. Both of those options can only lead you deeper into the masculine mindset. They take you in the opposite direction of your feminine heart. That's the opposite direction of where God wants to meet with you as his daughter. But there's also another problem. Both of them contradict the reality of how God designed the human brain to work. Whether it's evolutionary biology or the law of attraction, it's your husband who is still the main focus in those solutions. So when that seedling, the one that told you to do more in your marriage to get more, when that seedling grows because you've fertilized it with so much hyper focus, what you begin to manifest is not the positive, feel-good outcomes that those methods promised you. You get the opposite. When you think about your husband's actions or his behaviors towards you, in terms of what you don't like and how it could change, and the words you could use to tell him to make that change happen, or what hurts you and what he's doing that's hurting the marriage, or what he could be doing that would help the marriage, you have just shifted from identifying what you don't like into finding solutions. That's hyper focus. When you're a woman and you follow any method of relationship principles that encourage action-oriented thinking in order to produce an outcome, there's not going to be positive results in the marriage, because that's just not how men work. Masculinity is the provider of action-oriented thinking, not the receiver of the solutions. The only outcome you'll get for all your efforts in striving for a better marriage or an improved husband is frustration, and the positive results never appear. And that's for the same reason. That's just not how masculinity functions. So then, that frustration leads to disappointment, which produces yet more contention from you. Frustration, disappointment, and contention are revealed in nagging. For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. A good wife produces good things from her storeroom of good, and an evil wife produces evil things from her storeroom of evil. Matthew 12. God tells us that whatever occupies the greatest space in our thoughts is the foundation for our speech. That's the space where the seedlings are sprouted into words. If you're the one who's constantly focusing on all the ways to make the marriage better, and nothing is changing, your thoughts are ones of disappointment from frustration, which leads to contention and nagging. But contention and nagging are not the real problems. They're symptoms. And it's true that you can identify a problem or a sin. In lots of cases, you can just stop doing it because you've acknowledged it. And it's true if you've identified the root problem, not a symptom. Stopping a symptom doesn't fix or heal the real problem. And contention and nagging are not the real problems. Hyperfocus is. Change your focus and the nagging disappears. Sister, you're not evil, and neither was I. What we've been taught about ourselves as females and marriage, that's what's evil. Indoctrinating a feminine heart and mind with masculine expectations, that's what's evil. The storehouse of my mind was evil because of being coached with so much teaching about marriage and wifery that was completely from the masculine perspective. I was the one who was intentional about our marriage. It was always me doing the research and implementation. I was doing all the doing so the relationship would feel better. I had been following an ideology about marriage instead of living the truth of a one-flesh relationship. An ideology and truth are always at odds with each other. Who is responsible for creating that kind of division and for pitting concepts against each other to distort truth? Who perverts the beauty of complexity with just a drop of legalism? Who is the author of lies and hate? Who wants us against each other and ultimately separated from God? Satan. Satan's ultimate goal is to destroy, distort, or undermine any reflection that marriage could offer of the relationship between Christ and the church. What better way to do that than to have a body with two heads? Ephesians 5. Satan, in his cunning ways, has misled women into adopting a masculine mindset. Instead of embracing our God-given femininity, he's persuaded us to conform to masculine behaviors so that we sacrifice all the unique features and qualities designed specifically for us and for the health and enjoyment of a one-flesh relationship. When it comes to marriage, masculine methods are the tares among the wheat of your feminine heart and mind. The next thing I'm going to say is going to contradict commonly recognized Christian marriage advice. Not God or His Word, but the accepted teachings that are steeped in human tradition. Stop praying about your husband's problems. When you're praying, you're thinking about him. In this instance, that's what praying is. It's centering your thoughts on specific subject matter. That's the process that's filling the storeroom of your mind with streams of thoughts that manifest into your words. With every new marriage book or idea, any time that advice teaches you or coaches you from the masculine mindset, you are the one growing those streams of thoughts. And that's why they're taking up so much space in your mind. Stop focusing on what he's doing or not doing and concentrate on how you feel. Your feelings and emotions are yours to take responsibility for. That's what you have the power over. The solution is that by focusing on your own feelings, those are the words that will come out of your mouth. Those feelings that you experience and meditate on with God, that's where your healing and empowerment will come from. It will be your authentic truth that comes out of your mouth, not what you want your husband to change. I know it's not easy to do. I know every time I say, heal to feel and learn about your own feminine heart, I know you probably go into an emotional and mental void because you don't know how to do it, and that makes it scary and hard. I know that learning to think in your feelings is a new way for you. It's like learning a new language, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. And I know that I could give you conversational phrases and words that are tips, tricks, and strategies to do femininity or to act in a feminine way so that your man will change. But those are just band-aids over the real problem. I used band-aids in my masculine effort to heal for over 30 years, lots and lots of them. And God peeled all of them off, one by one, because He didn't want my broken heart covered. He wanted me to see it, and He wanted to heal me and sanctify me, and that's what caused the changes in me. I had to start thinking about my own feminine heart, soul, mind, and body, not the man's. Once I was able to see that I was thinking like a man, that was the beginning. I learned to accept my emotions as my own, and I acknowledged my feelings as my own, and I learned to articulate them. It's had two positive effects. One, it was my proof to myself that I am still healing, but also it removes any criticism and correction of your husband. You won't be blaming him in any way. Let me tell you what that looks like. Let's say you don't like something he said to you or something he did to you. You're uncomfortable with it, or you feel some kind of emotional pain. There is a natural instinct to look outside yourself and blame him for how you feel. I mean, you wouldn't be experiencing the pain if he hadn't said it, right? But here's the thing. Nobody can reach inside you and put pain there. What he did is triggered an emotional pain that was already inside of you. There's a two-part question that you need to ask yourself, not him. How did those words get into my heart? Remember, he doesn't put them there, or the pain they cause. You let them in. You don't have a boundary of where he ends and you start. So anything and everything from him to you gets through this non-existent barrier. And the next question is, why don't I have that barrier in place? Why don't I have a boundary there? I want to share the experience that taught me that I didn't have any boundaries in my marriage. We had yet another fight because of me trying to explain to him how he'd hurt my feelings and that I needed to talk about it. The results were the same. It was turned around to be my fault, as if I had been asking for a fight from him. He yelled at me and told me to stop attacking him and blaming him, and then he stormed outside. But something different happened with me this time. I didn't slump down and cry from emotional and mental exhaustion. I was looking out the kitchen window as he walked away, rather nonchalantly up the hill to the garage. I had the thought, something's not right here. I don't know what it is, but something's off. The two actions didn't match. The gait of his walk after the angry victim words that were directed at me, they're opposite. That's incongruency. I couldn't have articulated it that way back then, but it was the sharp contrast of the two feelings that tipped me off. My next thought on the heels of that feeling was that I have to be able to communicate when something has hurt me, right, God? Just like he just communicated to me that I hurt him. God, I was getting scared because he hadn't answered me. And I spun around to look away from the window, but my one hand was still on the counter. Then, all of a sudden, Dean was standing in front of me, and his arm was raised with a hammer in it, and my hand was no longer on the edge of the counter, but it was in the middle. I knew what he wanted from me. He wanted to be able to smash my hand and my fingers with that hammer, and for me not to complain or even flinch. I gasped and I said, "No, Lord, that can't be right." Now here's my watershed moment. The only marriage solution I had ever heard when it came to conflict resolution was always rounded out with submit more and respect more. So that was the only framework I had to operate from. In the vision, Dean started to bring the hammer down, but it went into slow motion, and the Lord said, "Is it submission to take your hand away?" I cried to God, "No, it's not." God said, "Your husband expects you to leave your hand there, to submit." But I would never ask my daughter to submit to that. The solution was to pull my hand away. Boundaries are how you resist submission. That's how God wants us to implement those conditional clauses that I mentioned earlier from question 6. Mental and emotional pain are the indicators of when to opt out of submission. It's how you resist evil to make it flee from you. James 4:7. Now, the only two options I had in the vision I was experiencing, the only two options I had were to leave my hand there and let him hit it, or to try and make him stop. They're both wrong. How fruitless was it to try and make him stop swinging the hammer, to make him change? I figured if I just explained it well enough or rightly enough, if I just had the right kind of communication and delivered in the best method, he would eventually understand that what I needed from him was to stop swinging the hammer, that he would see how he's hurting me or how he's neglecting me. So, over 30 years of marriage, that's the main method I chose, because I knew leaving my hand there was not an option. But God's way is neither of them. We don't have the right to take away someone else's free choice. My responsibility was for my own discomfort. Stopping emotional pain from another person is not about blaming them or making them change their choices or behaviors. It's about you owning your autonomy as an individual daughter of God and the free choices for your feminine personality that comes along with that designation. Lillian's hand was not her own. You are not your own, for you are bought at a price. So glorify God with your body. Your hand is not your own, neither is your heart, mind, or soul. In 1 Corinthians 6, Paul instructs, "Do not let any part of your body become an instrument of evil to serve sin." Dean did not have the right to hurt me. My hand belongs to God. God's not just talking about the sin you do, but also the evil done to you that serves the sin of your husband. He sins against you every time he uses his masculinity as an instrument against your femininity instead of being the source for it. You don't need to explain the reason for your emotion. That's where blame lives. It's not about him. It's only about your own feelings. In my vision, I slowly withdrew my hand and looked up into Dean's eyes, saying, "I don't like the way this feels. I don't feel safe." And I turned and walked away. No blame, no accusing, no explaining. 100% ownership of my whole feminine mind, heart, soul, and body, and how I would take responsibility for them going forward in the marriage. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Your time is incredibly valuable, and it means so much that you chose to spend it here with me, supporting this channel. If a certain section of the video struck a chord with you, or if you have insights that could benefit our sisterhood, I encourage you to share them. Every comment, like, and share plays a key role in reaching more women who might benefit from learning about healing and nurturing their feminine spirit. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.